let's be honest, the strategic certainties that we've all relied on for the past couple of decades, they're gone. We are now living in an era of just profound fragmentation, but also reorganization. So to navigate it, you're going to need more than just a map. You need a whole new way of seeing. And in this briefing, we're going to synthesize the clashing perspectives of 4 of the world's leading thinkers to give you exactly that clarity.
So let's just dive right in with a pretty sobering assessment from geopolitical analyst Ian Bremmer. And look, this isn't just hyperbole. It's a framing of the strategic stakes. It really sets the tone for our entire analysis, because the decisions that leaders like you make in this environment, well, they're going to have consequences that echo for decades.
So this brings us to the central question for every C-suite, for every boardroom. In a world where there's no single power setting the rules, how do you navigate the chaos and, more importantly, how do you uncover the opportunity within it? That is the challenge we're going to tackle by synthesizing 4 powerful and often conflicting perspectives.
Okay, first up, let's confront the forces of fragmentation head-on. We're going to analyze this through the dual lenses of geopolitical risk and, the return of good old-fashioned hard power rivalry.
At the heart of all this is a concept from Ian Bremmer called a G0 world. And it's a pretty simple idea. It signifies a global power vacuum. There's no single nation or block of nations that is both willing and able to set the international agenda. And in the absence of a global sheriff, the law of the jungle kind of starts to reassert itself in how countries deal with each other. And here's where Bremmer's analysis gets really interesting. He says the primary source of all this global instability isn't an external adversary. Nope, it's the United States turned inward. He argues that this deep political polarization we're seeing is actually eroding the foundations of the very global order America built. And that creates a vacuum that, well, it worries our allies and it really emboldens our rivals.
Now, adding another, frankly, pretty grim layer to this picture of fragmentation is John Mearsheimer. He's a leading voice of what's called offensive realism. Basically, this school of thought argues that great powers are always perpetually trying to maximize their share of world power. From his point of view, that post-Cold War holiday from history we all enjoyed, that was the exception, not the rule. The natural state of great power competition is back, and boy, is it intensifying.
And you can see this rivalry playing out on 2 absolutely critical fronts. On one side, you've got the grinding war of attrition in Ukraine, a land war in Europe, something we thought was history. On the other, you have this ticking clock over Taiwan, which Mearsheimer calls the defining geopolitical challenge of our era. And for global business, these aren't some distant problems. They are direct threats to your supply chain integrity and your market stability.
But here's the thing, fragmentation is only half the equation. At the exact same time, powerful forces of reorganization, driven by connectivity and technology, are reshaping the world in parallel. And that creates a deeply contradictory and confusing landscape.
And this is where strategist Parag Khanna comes in with a really powerful counter-narrative. He basically says that for decades, pundits have been predicting the death of globalization, and they have always been wrong. His core idea is that globalization is an evolutionary system. When you put it under pressure, it doesn't break, it just reroutes. It finds new pathways for capital, for talent, and for data to flow.
And according to Khanna, the single biggest story of this century isn't the US or China. It's the Asianization of Asia. I mean, think about it. With over half the world's population, this region is now the true center of gravity for the global economy. And here's the kicker. Asian nations now trade more with each other than they do with North America and Europe combined. That's a tectonic shift in economic power. Okay, our final perspective comes from the futurist Amy Webb, who argues we're not just in some new tech cycle. No, we are in a technology supercycle. This isn't about incremental stuff like the next smartphone. This is about a convergence of technologies that is fundamentally rewriting the operating system of business, of biology, and of society itself. Webb's critical insight is that the true disruption engine isn't any one of these domains you see here. It's the convergence of all 3. It starts with AI, which then merges with biotechnology, and is finally connected to the physical world through this incredible web of advanced sensors. The result of this is just staggering. We're moving toward a world of programmable matter and, quite literally, reprogrammable life. This is the source code for the next economy. So, how do we reconcile these powerful competing forces? You've got fragmentation on one hand, reorganization on the other. Let's try to synthesize these different views to build a more complete and more actionable strategic picture.
And right here, you can see the core tension. In Mearsheimer's world, a security crisis, say a conflict over Taiwan, could sever economic ties in an instant. But in Khanna's world, those commercial and digital ties are now just too deep and too complex to ever be truly broken.
But you know, amidst all these contradictions, we find this fascinating point of convergence. Both the geopolitical realist Bremmer and the global connectivity advocate Khanna, they actually arrive at the same conclusion. The right term for what's happening isn't de-globalization, it's de-risking. Companies aren't pulling back from the world, they're intelligently reconfiguring their supply chains and diversifying their markets to build resilience.
So the billion-dollar question, what does this complex picture mean for your board and for your strategy? Let's distill all of this synthesis down into an actionable playbook for C-suite leaders who are navigating these turbulent years ahead.
All right, your strategic agenda has to be built on these 4 interconnected pillars. First, geopolitical resilience, so you can withstand shocks from this G0 world. Second, strategic awareness, to actually anticipate market shifts that are driven by these big power dynamics. Third, global diversification, especially toward the new growth centers in Asia. And finally, tech foresight. This means treating advanced tech not as some IT function, but as the absolute core of your mission.
We'll leave you with this really powerful thought from Amy Webb because it just perfectly frames the ultimate leadership challenge today. Your job is to lead an organization that can adapt as the fundamental codes of business, our environment, and even truth itself are being rewritten by these powerful global forces.
Now, if you want to bring this level of intellectual weight and these specific world-class experts into your own boardroom or event, you need to talk to the team at speakercuration.com. Speakercuration is the architect of this clarity and the premier partner for curating high-stakes leadership conversations. Visit speakercuration.com to book these speakers.